Hey, D. McClung, Archer Monologues. I'm going to read you something. Most Americans are miseducated, indoctrinated, manipulated, conditioned, dumbed down. You think that's because of the fluoride in the water? You think? All right. Illogical, hysterical, retarded, clinically speaking. In other words, that's a valid, sound, clinical word, and it applies today. I'm not talking about slurring someone, like to say, oh, you're an idiot. And that's just a slur. That's just an insult. And people say that. They call people idiots, even though these people are not idiots. And people who say things like that, like, oh, you're an idiot, or you're a moron, you're stupid, they're actually saying, in their opinion, that, that let's say, for example, someone calls me an idiot, that's just stupid and ridiculous, because I'm not, and I have proof. So when someone calls me an idiot, it's because, well, they're just being nasty. I'll just call him an idiot because I don't like what he said, or I don't agree with what he said, or like I'm too stupid to understand what he said. Things like that. All right? So, clinically speaking, retarded, meaning they actually have an IQ. And it's my observation of human beings, Americans mostly, is my observation that most people are retarded to some degree. In other words, below average IQ. If you've got an IQ of like less than 90, you're clinically retarded. That's not to say you're a bad person. I'm not saying that you're like an ogre or some kind of troll living underneath a bridge or whatever. I'm just saying, you're not someone in possession of normal range of intellect. And just bear in mind, when you're talking about the averages, you're talking about, these down here that are below, say, 100. You want to use 100 as the median. You got a bunch of people down here below 100 IQ, and you have some people on the other side above the average IQ. And more than likely, the extremes of intellect possessed by people has to compensate for the extreme in the lesser degree of intellect in order to bring the average up to 100. Now, in a test, if you take the IQ test, a legitimate one, a valid one, by the way, and you find that that certain amount of people fall under the medium IQ of, say, 100 or even 90 to 110, and you find that a lot of people fall under that range, like 49, 71, 56, 42, 12, whatever, and then you have some people over that are like an IQ of anywhere, over 110, 115, 120, 125, 135, 145, 160, 180. How many people have to have an IQ of 100 and, well, let's say 100 and, well, over 120 in order to compensate for all the people that are under the median IQ of 100? How do you balance that out to come to an average? You do you do a mathematical equation like add all these up, and divide by the whole. And you come out to some sort of average. Now, I'm of the opinion, this is my, shall we say, learned opinion, that the average IQ in America is not 100. Excuse me. I think, this is just me talking, my opinion, I think that if you have, say, 100 people, Americans, you're not going to have 50% of those people being less than average IQ and 50% of those people being above average IQ. You would think so. In order to come to an average, you've got to have 50 people that are not up to par, average, let's say between 90 and 110, and you have to have 50% of the people that are IQs of over 110, up to 180 or so. But that's not the case. Not always. And again, I'm saying this is my opinion, or my, and I'm not even suggesting that it's an expert opinion. I'm just, as a human being, I'm just making an observation and deriving an opinionated conclusion or observation about Americans. I don't believe that there are people, I just don't believe the average, mathematical, statistical average, that half the people in this country are less than 100 and half are over 100. It's possible, but it's not always necessarily so in any society. In regards to 50, there may be 60 or 70% of the people may be under 100 IQ, and 27, just 7% of the population might be actually intelligent, just say genius level intelligence. Where the cutoff is for genius is actually could be interpreted as anything over the average, or let's say over 110. Well, you're going to look at any 100 people in America, and this is still my opinion. I'm not saying this is fact. I'm not saying it's even true. I'm not saying that I've made any effort to prove this one way or the other. Just an observation. I believe that 70% to 90% of Americans are, just say, average to below average, in the 100 and below IQ range. I guess I could include 110. 70 to 90% of Americans fall in the range of less than 110 IQ. All the way down to 49, 71, 42. And if you're counting everybody, including, how would you even do a study of that? Would you exclude everyone under the age of 12? Would you just exclude infants who have not learned to talk yet? Under 6 months of age, let's say. In other words, if you're talking about the statistical average IQ in America, or the statistical ranges of below average and above average, are you counting everybody, including, like I said, infants? babies that have no skills, have not developed or matured into a point where they could actually use English in a conversation or even engage in a conversation? Are we talking about the people with an IQ of less than 50 who are not mentally up to engaging in any kind of higher level of intellectual thinking? I think most Americans are a little bit shy of average, to be honest with you. That's my opinion. I'm not saying everybody is for a fact. I'm just saying the statistics seem to show, warrant and justify an opinion such as the one I've just given you. For example, and I'm not going to use myself as an example. I'm not going to brag about my intellect. That's not the point of this discussion or monologue, as it were. Let's say we have a person with an IQ of 140, and that person is certainly above average, pretty much above average. If you have someone, I kind of went off on that direction, but I should have probably gone in another direction there. Let's put it this way. If 7% of the population are above average to the point of being considered as geniuses, or geniusi, as I like to say, that would leave 93% below genius level. And would we say that the average IQ of those that are below average would fall into a category of, let's say, less than 110? All right. So consider this. 7% of the American population fall into the category of extremely intelligent. That is to say, above average to a good degree. And they could be called geniuses. 7%. At least 97% that are not geniuses, and who are most likely not even possessing a, let's say, the higher range of average, 110. If the average IQ in America is less than 110, that includes people with IQs of 49 and 71 and 42. So what I'm saying is, 7% of the people in America are fairly intelligent. I would say what could be or should be the average or the norm. And again, I'm just expressing my opinion. So if you have people with IQs of less than 100, and you do, and most of those are included in that 93 percentile range, then you can see a certain pattern in the population, and you can conclude certain things and come to a conclusion that you can formulate into, let's say, an opinion. You could, I suppose, actually come to a logical conclusion, which would be an accurate observation or calculation, and suggest that for sure, not just an opinion, but an actual conclusion of fact, that many Americans are not up to par, even in regards to the average, or are slightly below the average. Let's say like 92 or whatever. Now, what's the point of all this? The point of all this is as I started out reading you something, an observation of human beings, a descriptive sentence, that we say, of Americans. And I will now continue. I forget where I left off, and I can't go back and find out. So I didn't make any notes. Should have wrote it down before I went off on a tangent. I think I was at clinically speaking. So, continuing, Americans, most Americans are apathetic, oblivious, illiterate, bullheaded, stubborn, and is bullheaded and stubborn the same thing? That could be redundant, couldn't it? But I just wanted to throw bullheaded in there because they've got a lot of bull in their heads, which is short for bullshit. Yeah, most Americans have bullshit in their heads. They think things that are just bullshit. They have been bullshitted to the point of being bullshitters themselves. And so moving on. Arrogant, hypocrites, and delusional, prudish, argumentative, judgmental, mentally and emotionally unstable, childish, mentally lazy, religious zealots and fanatics, paranoid, suffer from some degree of mental illness, insanity, would rather argue than actually listen to reason and learn. This is very true of the internet, and are overwhelmingly rude, crude, and ill-mannered, and lack tact, common sense, and any sense of logic. I could go on, but what's the use? Now, having said all that, and as I explained, saying that and meaning it, what does that tell you about the American people? And do you agree with any part of that? Do you disagree with it? Right? What part of that descriptive of Americans do you not agree with? Or even, for that matter, understand? If you go on Facebook, for example, and there are other places, other websites you can go to, other social media websites that pretty much demonstrate or illustrate a common trait, tendency in a people. Of course, you have people in other countries besides Americans that are on the internet and join these social media sites. There are foreigners that are members of Facebook and Google Plus, for example. There are other people that live in other parts of the world besides America that belong to, that contribute to Twitter, and so on. So what I'm saying is, as far as, let's just take Facebook, for example, and let's keep in mind that Facebook is manipulated by, that Zuckerbucker guy, who's admitted to manipulating people, which is, I think, probably borders on criminality. Certainly very nasty of him to do that. I think it's just pathetic. So, anyway, if you don't agree with any part of that, and you can listen to it again, it's quite a long list of descriptors of what I think, from my observations, describes Americans fairly accurately. But what about those people that are not the most people? What about those people that are the other section of humanity in America? What about that other 5 to 10% of Americans. And ask yourself these questions. And the point of me here is not to be, not to put people down, not to say to them, not to slur them and offend them in any crude manner of speaking. I'm not saying these things to hurt people's feelings and just to, upset people and, cause them to be mad at me and, call me bad names. And as I've said a couple of times already, this is my observation, this is my opinion. It might be biased. Might be. It more than likely is biased. And a lot of people use the opinion, the word opinion, and the concept of opinion to justify their behavior and justify their opinion. And a lot of people seem to think that it's okay to have an opinion that's wrong or just simply so biased that it's just pathetic. But if you have something to say about this and you can speak and write in English, you can comprehend English, at least an average comprehension of English, and you can use it adequately, and you want to make a comment, you want to ask a question, you want to express a different view of what I've just said in my descriptive sentence of Americans. You are free to have that opinion. You are free to express that opinion. And I'm even granting you permission to make a comment in the comment section of this podcast. And you could say nasty things and whatever you want to say. No censorship. Oh, well, I should probably point out that if you're just totally obnoxious and you are argumentative, as I have included in the list there, and you want to just argue with me because, you enjoy arguing, then, probably I won't leave your comment in your comment section. But anyway, if you threaten me, like with bodily harm, I might not leave that there for other people to see. I might delete that. Now, I don't think we could call that censorship. We could just call it good management of my own personal podcast website situation. And it's being responsible if I at least pay attention to what people are saying on my podcast, on my page, on the internet. I'm just not going to let terrorists and bullies get away with being terrorists and bullies on my own website and my own podcast. It's not going to happen. I can't sue them for being bullies. I can't file charges against them for being bullies. And by the way, being something is quite fine and okay, but acting up on that something is where you get in trouble. A lot of people say, you think. And they'll accuse people of being different things. Call people bad names. And I'm not saying I'm innocent of calling people an idiot, because they are. Some people are. From my observation and from the information and data that I have about that person, I think sometimes it's quite legitimate to suggest that that person is an idiot in a clinical sense of the word. Again, the clinical sense of the word. You have to remember, these words are not something I made up. These are not slurs, but they're not slang. They're used as slang today because anybody can declare somebody else a retard. You're retarded, And they don't have to have any clinical evidence. They don't have to have any scientific proof to back that up. It's an opinion. But it's not always just an opinion. Sometimes it is a critical, calculated, analytic observation and conclusion of fact. I know people with IQs of 49. They are retarded. That's not being rude or crude. That's just stating a fact. They are retarded. I could compare people to my own intellect and suggest that anybody with an IQ less than mine is retarded by comparison to me. Just a comparison to my IQ. That's legitimate. And I would, why would I say that? Why would I compare people with IQs of 110 or less to my IQ, which is considerably more than that? Why would I compare those two? Statistics to my, what would be my reasoning? What would be my motivation? I would certainly have to have a point, a reason for doing that. Is it to brag? Is it, am I just being an arrogant bastard? And say, guess what? My IQ is like 20 points higher than yours, or 50 points higher than yours, or 100 points higher than yours. What's the point? On the other hand, am I not allowed? Is free speech not a fact? In America, free speech is not always a true reality. It's not always a fact. There are many examples in America where talking, for example, is a crime, a felony. Now, aside from libel and slander and defamation, which is somebody saying something about another person that's just not true, that harms that other person in some way. And here's an interesting little anecdote. Liberace, and if you don't know who Liberace is, you're way too young to, you are young, like probably born in the last 20 years. Maybe you've never heard of Liberace. Liberace was a flamboyant, fancy dresser, fancy pants, who was extremely overdressed on his performances. He was a pianist and say an entertainer. But somebody said that he was homosexual. Somebody said, "You're homosexual," and as a result of that person saying that, Liberace sued them. Said, "I'm not gay. I'm not a homosexual." Now, to be honest with you, I don't know if he ever said that, but he sued nonetheless because somebody did say, "You're gay. You're homosexual," and he sued, and he won. And the person who had called him a homosexual was, levied some pretty steep fines, as I understand it, as I recall, and was ordered to cease and desist from saying such lies about Liberace. But the irony in that, or the amusing part in that is, and it proves a point, it does make a point at least, that if you say something that damages someone else, even if it's true, you can be held accountable. As it turns out, Liberace was gay. And he, in fact, had gay lovers. That is to say, men. In fact, he was living long term with a particular young man, and was pretty much taking care of him, feeding him, clothing him, giving a roof over his head, and, the other stuff, probably the normal physical stuff. I'm guessing. Don't know. Wasn't there. Have no idea what they did in private. But at any rate, he was gay, And this was, well known at some point, particularly towards the end of his life, or after he died, it came out that he was in fact gay. And by today's standards, he probably wouldn't get a second look. No one would even give a damn or pay attention. Yeah, so you're gay and you have rights too, it's like everybody else. And they would just kind of not really get hyper about that. Today, being gay is like, hey, I'm gay. And, well, that's cool, I guess. Whatever you want to be. You recognize you're gay. That's cool. That's healthy, probably. And then other people would just say, oh, okay, so I suspected you were. Back in those days, back in when was it, the 50s or 60s, when Liberace sued and won the case. And the guy was, in a court of law at least, it was declared that Liberace was in fact not gay, and you called him gay, so therefore you're going to pay him $20 million, or whatever it was. I don't remember the actual settlement. But the point is the bottom line is, the guy who was calling him gay was ordered to cease and desist from calling him gay. One of those cases where you actually win your case, even though what the person said that was labeled as slander was in fact true. That's one of the problems in America today, I think, is that a lot of times people say things and they accuse other people of being something and doing something, which is two different things. Being something and doing something is not the same thing. You can be all kinds of things and not do anything bad or act upon that tendency that you might possess. Like, you might be gay. That doesn't necessarily mean you have sex with people of the same gender as you. Maybe you're celibate. And the same thing can be said for other words. Like calling me an idiot is just almost humorous, that it's so absurd. Because I'm not. Clinically or otherwise. On the other hand, we're human, and I'm human, and we do, as human beings, make mistakes and do not live up to our highest standards of intellect and good manners and well-behaved, intellectual, reasonable, rational human being. I rant and rave from time to time. As if you're listening to this radio show and you've been listening to my podcast over the past year or so, I can rant pretty good. I'm not going to apologize for that. Doesn't mean I'm hysterical. It just means that I can, I have a way with the words, and I can use them to express my rant, as it were. All right. So I wanted to say that. I've said that. I got that message across. Hopefully you understood what I said. If you agree with me, that's great. If not, then you're probably one of those words, or one or more of those words I've used to describe Americans, most Americans, may very well apply to you. But please don't be argumentative about this. If you have something to say it, fine. Write it in the comment section. I'll look at it, I'll read it, I'll consider it. If I don't like it, maybe I'll say so. Maybe I'll analyze your comment to a point, because that's what I do. It's my job. It's my occupation. It's what I do. It's who I am. It's my job to be critical and to exercise critical analytic observations and to come to calculated logical conclusions about what people say and do. And there's a difference. And I'm good at it. And that's probably a personal opinion of myself, but it can be proven. Anyhow, had my say. That's what I wanted to do. And that's the message for today. And have a good day. I'll catch you next time.